This is the Flex Network. Flex on everybody.
Oh, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Flex Network. I'm your host, Flex Shane. You can follow me on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. I'm joined by my favorite Dynasty degenerate, Mr. Alan Seslowski. Follow him on Twitter at Alan Seslowski. Al, how you doing, brother?
I'm just a regular degenerate, not just a Dynasty one, which I do appreciate that intro. But you would be my favorite Dynasty degenerate as well. But
I appreciate that.
In real life, you're more of a good guy.
Well, I mean, I think that's more of a gray area, but we'll go with that.
It's the quiet ones you always have to watch, right? Is that what they say?
That's right. How many startups have you joined so far this year, Al?
So as of taping of this, we're in February 21st. I've done 2 new startup drafts, Dynasty drafts, where you're talking about like 30-man rosters. The real all-in. One of them actually is called like Dynasty Degenerates, and the other one was a Royal Rumble League. It was, some of them are 2 tight end. They're all super flex. I like experimenting with all the different new formats. It's interesting, and this is where again, I know it's a long commitment to jump in these dynasty leagues, but I'm figuring out new ways to manage them, and especially when they have these massive rosters, there's not much to do other than the rookie draft.
The rookie draft is fun. Well, okay, so this is really interesting, Al. So you're in startups right now. How much are you valuing trying to get those rookie picks in, say, round 1 versus getting established players right now? Like this rookie class in general, I'd say it's pretty deep, right? But you look at certain positions at quarterback, we've got 4 or 5 potential legitimately starting quarterbacks. We have 3, maybe 4 legitimate running backs, and then there's quite a few wide receivers. So are you willing to say forego some of your early, mid-round, first-round picks to get a guy who's got a few question marks, like a Juju Smith-Schuster? Somebody like that who the Dynasty community is kind of cooled on recently?
So are you saying, like, would I rather have whoever the 8th pick in the draft is versus an established player? I think that really depends. I mean, I always tend to lean towards the proven commodity, being that even just include the quarterbacks in that. In first-round rookie ADP, I mean, there's like a 50% bust rate. 50% success rate,
It's crazy.
So
Yep.
I mean, if you have identified a commodity, now not maybe necessarily Juju Smith-Schuster, because there's been a wide range of outcomes, but if you're in I'm trying to think, like someone like, say, a running back like Austin Eckler, for example, who's done it. We know he got injured. We're hopeful that he'll come back next year. I'd always rather have a rock solid player like that than, say, one of the rookie running backs that we'll probably talk about today. How about you? How do you handle all that?
Well, Al, we've talked about this. I'm trying to reevaluate my entire perspective, my dynasty life, because I'm one of these guys who gets way too enamored by these rookies in the rookie class.
We all do it, Shane. Don't
We do it. Oh, I know. But
you know what? Admitting you have a problem.
Exactly. The next step is solving it. But what if you don't want to be helped, Al? That's my question to you.
I've been there. You can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped.
Exactly. But I mean, so we joined a league last year together, and it's a pretty fun league. It's a 2 tight end, super flex, all that fun stuff, right? But you took it down. That's the fun and games league. And one of the reasons you took it down was because you're like, shit, man, like I'm going to go after established players.
Yep.
And you're not afraid to give up one of those early, potentially valuable rookie picks to win this year. And sometimes don't we play this to win it?
I'm going to give you an interesting poll that I saw. So Jordan McNamara of the Football Guys always talks about this poll, and I just think it's great. So he put out a poll, or he saw a poll, and it said, "What is your favorite part of Dynasty?" And only 30%, 30% of people said winning. The other 36% of people said trading. Like there's people like the end, they favor the means over the ends. Like that is, and it sounds like you've fallen victim to that that category as well. And we all have. I mean, listen, that's what's so great about Dynasty. Even when you're losing, you're winning, right? It's always fun to rebuild.
The funny thing about Dynasty versus, say, like a season-long league is that you try to have this 2 to 3 year window, some people longer, some people shorter, but like a multiple year approach. But the thing is that we forget it's so hard to nail down what the hell is going to happen this year, right? Well, so we try to get this crystal ball out, and then like our approach to say like a season long league is often very different to an approach to a dynasty league, and maybe that's not necessarily right.
Well, I help the I kind of steward the roster watch dynasty startup rankings. I kind of keep them, I form them, I shape them. Obviously, Alex and Byron and the Trash Man, they all have their inputs and the way they form it. But I constantly am in debates with them and in battles with them as about pushing up guys that are unproven. And my core philosophy is different than, say, Alex, and smartly so. He's such a sharp player, and he's won these leagues, but he's thinking about dynasty in 3 to 4 year windows, and that's definitely an approach. My approach is to think about it as more of a 1 to 2 year window. Okay, so like you just said, the key to that is that we don't even know what's going to happen this year. How are we going to know what's going to happen next year?
Yeah, well, exactly. This is a good example. So this was a trade that was offered to me at the start of last season. Straight up, my AJ Brown for the other guy's Devontae Adams. I rejected that trade because I wanted to stick with AJ Brown, the young phenom. And then, Devontae Adams comes out last season and just has like a prolific year, even with missing, 2 or 3 games with the injury. So the question I have to myself is, do I regret not making that trade? And sometimes I do. And then sometimes, I'm looking at my roster because I think we all kind of do it. We roster bait a little bit, right? And I'm like, shit, I love having AJ Brown on my squad this year.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. And also at this time last year, the fantasy community was leaving Aaron Rodgers for dead. And not only does he bounce back, he is the MVP of the league. So if you foresaw that, then maybe you would have rethought that trade. But I think that we often say, oh, if I only knew that, if I only think about it. If you were high on Aaron Rodgers last year, he was like QB 12. If you were consensus on him, he was QB 15, and if you were low on him, he was probably even like QB 20. It's in dynasty startups. I mean, he was literally an afterthought.
Speaking of an afterthought, Alan Seslowski, last year at this time, we were talking about a guy by the name of Mr. Jalen Hurts, who you could get in your Superflex league mid to late round 2. He was a guy that you and I were talking about all last season. Yeah, absolutely. That seems like a great move right now. But I can tell you what, man, I drafted Jalen Hurts, I don't remember, 2.9, 2.10, something like that last year in our rookie draft.
I think we mocked you for it too.
You mocked me for it. Well, the thing is, I passed on a guy like Antonio Gibson. I passed on a guy like Laviska Shenault to get Jalen Hurts. And I'm thinking in my head, and I remember I told you, because I was on the clock and I spent, I got up early that day knowing that it would be my pick shortly. I was watching videos. I was getting excited. I'm like, you know what? I got to pull the trigger on Jalen Hurts. This is just a guy that I think can be next level in terms of a fantasy football QB. And at the time, man, 3 quarters through the season, I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I passed on Antonio freaking Gibson for Jalen Hurts. And now it's seeming like it's probably was the right decision. I don't know.
So it's funny because the other day when I was doing a podcast on the DFS Army feed with Geek, I said, I kind of just threw it out there as a reaction that, Jalen Hurts will be a super flex dynasty startup late round 1 pick now. He's about QB 10. He'll go right after Russell Wilson, or right around there. And Russell Wilson's ADP is anywhere from like 9 to like 14. And then I threw it out there in a Facebook dynasty group, and people, I couldn't believe it. And again, this is just peanut gallery sort of comments, but no one's convinced that Jalen Hurts is even going to be the starter. I even saw people saying that the Eagles would draft a QB. I'm like
6, yeah. I don't.
But I was
get
like,
it.
wait a second here. The whole point of getting rid of Carson Wentz's contract, other than was because you have a rookie contract, and we know the most valuable the commodity in sports is the capable rookie quarterback on a rookie contract.
Yep.
So now you have it. It's like, I know they're eating some dead cap, but why would they now search for the next? They have it already. So I'm with you. I couldn't even believe there was any resistance. People were saying that Jalen Hurts could be traded for a first-round pick during the NFL draft. Bonkers.
Why?
To me. Yeah,
Why?
I mean, he already showed everything you need to see. I mean, he actually has the revealed upside. You in Canada, do you guys have that show? Let's make a deal. Sorry, not Let's Make a Deal. What's the one with Monty Hall? Yeah, Let's Make a Deal. Do you remember that?
Yes, I kind of do. Yep.
And then I think, what's his name? Who's the comedian who hosted it after? There was another comedian.
Man,
I
I never
forgot
watched
his.
the show, but
Yeah, but
I know what the
anyway,
concept is. Yeah.
yeah. So there's the Monty Hall. Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Sports often talks about the Monty Hall dilemma, the Monty Hall issue, and like when
Yep.
you reveal what you have there.
Yep.
And you like what you have, why are you going to basically trade it in for something that you haven't seen in hopes that it's better? You know, I mean,
Al, it's basically the exact same, like they've been doing it since game shows since the 1950s. That you can win this brand new washer and dryer, or you could choose between door number 2, and
right.
you have no idea what's behind door number 2. It might be a car.
Now, if it's a washer and dryer, no problem. But you already have a car.
Yeah,
Jalen Hurts is already, you have a sports car. So, hey, we might have a better sports car behind this one or a bag of peanuts. You know, it's like if it was just a washer and dryer, then sure, maybe you take the gamble. If you have like Andy Dalton or if you have some middling QB 16, but you have someone, you're hoping to land someone that has the upside of Jalen Hurts. And like I said, you brilliantly identified Hurts early on. And I was too chicken little to take him. I almost took, I think, Darrington Evans in a dynasty draft, and you talked me off that in another draft I was in. You told me, "What the hell are you thinking?" And now, I mean, again, I salute you, my friend, for making me see it the clear way. So we will call you not a truther of Jalen Hurts, but you are like the Christopher Columbus.
Oh my goodness!
For Canada, that doesn't really as a good reference. But you are the discoverer of Jalen Hurts.
Let's go with that. I'll take it.
Who discovered Canada?
I mean, it was the explorers.
I mean, because even whether right, wrong, or however you feel about Christopher Columbus, he's credited.
Oh my gosh!
With
there's, you know what? There's about 3 or 4. You're taking me back to like grade 7 social studies, Al. Like it's like Jacques Cousteau, and there was 2 or 3. I think there was a few English guys. There was like I mean, because we had the whole history where it was like the French versus the British for 200 years, right?
Got it.
But let's not get into a Canadian history lesson. What do you think? So I was one of my coworkers. He lives in Philly, and he's like a devout Eagles fan. And when I was chatting with him about this, I was asking, okay, so you have Jalen Hurts. 1, do you think he's the future? And 2, what do you want at 6, right? Because the Eagles are picking at 6 in the draft. And for 1, he said, yes, he was ecstatic that Jalen Hurts is now their starter. But 2, he wanted either Devonta Smith or Jamar Chase at that 6 spot. I mean, I think Chase is kind of like a snap call if he's there at 6 for the Eagles. And, I love Jalen Reagor. I don't think he's a 1 in the NFL, but I think he can be a very good 2. And if they can get a guy like Jamar Chase, and then they got to have a guy like Jalen Reagor, they of course have Miles Sanders in the backfield, Dallas Goedert. From an offensive perspective, that's a pretty elite group of core players. And look, the Eagles need a lot of help right now, but if they could do that, I mean, they could put up 25, 30 points a game, which we know, some of the teams that made the playoffs this year, they were averaging 31, 32, 33 points per game. That's what you need to do in today's NFL. So I could see that. That would make me excited.
Yeah. That's the game plan, right? That I think that the Eagles will take a Jamar Chase if he's there. He probably won't be. I'm among the Devonta Smith doubters. I mean, I've heard, you hear chatter. Who the hell knows what's true?
Yeah.
But if this guy weighs in at 165 pounds, I mean, there's not a long history of 170-pound wide receivers. Now I know he has elite skills, and there's probably people that are a lot more have done a lot more tape study than I have at this point that like him. But I'm just looking at like the profile, and I mean, is it from what you've seen already? Is Devonta Smith like this all-time receiver that deserves to go in the top 10, or is he more like, hey, he's a rock solid guy. He's probably better than Hollywood Brown. He's the best, or is he more? 165, 170 pounds. That's going to be a problem in the NFL.
Here's the difference between a guy like Marquise Brown, a guy like Henry Ruggs, and a guy like Devonta Smith. So what I mean is like these are all kind of smaller, slighter, athletic players. I feel like Devonta Smith, say what you want, that Jalen Waddle was on the same pace, and I love Jalen Waddle, but Devonta Smith did it. Just like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, people are shitting on Michael Thomas that all he could do was bubble screens, right? Well, so can Devonta Smith. Like, he produced, right? You can't take that production away from somebody. I think that if he's in a right offense, then a creative offense that can get him the ball in his hands and let him do work, that's where he's going to be successful.
Well, let me ask you this. So let's say he's not in the right offense. Let's just say he's in an NFL offense. Let's say the Giants take him at like 10 or wherever they're picking.
Yeah.
I mean, are you still as bullish on Smith if he's in an offense like the Giants?
Not really, to be honest with you,
but you'd still. But here you go. But would you be bullish on Jamar Chase if the Giants moved up to take him?
I feel like Jamar Chase is the kind of player that's going to be able to thrive in any situation.
Okay, so there you go.
That's the difference. Yeah.
So if that's it, if I'm just going on what you just said there, you don't take a wide receiver that needs to be situationally appropriate in the top 5, 7, 8 picks. You take a guy that can transcend situation. That's what you're looking for in a top 8 pick. You're looking for a blue chip player that doesn't matter what team or what situation's on, you hope that he can break through or elevate everyone else. That is what I believe if you have a top 5, 7, 8, 10 pick that you need to make sure of happens, because you never know when conditions on your team deteriorate. You don't want your first round pick to be blanked.
No, of course. Trust me, I agree with you 100%. I think that where Devonta Smith should go was probably late first round, where, kind of like maybe 15 to 20, or even, where did Brandon Ayuk go? Did he go?
He went in the 20s. He went like 20. And also the 49ers would have taken him at 13 or whatever that pick was. Yep. They knew that he would still be there, so they traded back.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, I don't think we should forget the fact that Devonta Smith did win the Heisman Trophy. And
scouts don't care about that, though.
But Al, like we talk about it all the time, right? We talk about it from fantasy football perspective. We don't care what the name is. If this guy's scoring me fantasy points,
right,
who the fuck cares, right? And that's kind of my approach with Devonta Smith. Like, there's other guys I would take ahead of him in my rookie drafts right now, right? I'm not saying Devonta Smith is even like my number one. Probably he's in my top 5 for sure, but I still am trying to iron that out. That's going to be landing spot dependent. But I don't see him falling any further than my top 5, because I go back to the fact that this guy's put up production in college against college, like elite level talent from a college perspective, right? He's obviously athletic. I just think that there's this narrative on Twitter right now, and Twitter can be amazing, but it can also be like a cesspool, right, for hate and just negativity. I think that people are giving Devonta Smith too much of a hard time for his weight. Like, you talk about drafting guys in the first round that are light. Like, how much did Marquise Brown weigh coming out? 165?
I think he was like a 175. But yeah, I understand. There's just not a long history of players like that being blue chip top 10 players. He would be
an outlier. Let's call it what it is, right? If he goes and he is successful in the NFL, he would be an outlier. But couldn't you argue that he was a bit of an outlier in college as well?
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm not a hater. In a very important league that I'm in, one that's a higher stakes dynasty draft, I have pick 6. So I'm probably going to be faced with that choice. Do I take Devonta Smith, or do I take Kyle Pitts, or do I go to the next running back, or do I take QB3? I mean, I'm going to have that decision. That's why I'm trying to get as many data points as I can before it happens.
I'm glad you brought up Kyle Pitts. So I was driving out, about a 3-hour drive yesterday between where I had to go, and so I was listening to my Sirius, and I typically will listen to NFL radio, but depending on the commercials, I can't stand commercials, so I flip around, and I was listening to ESPN a little bit. And to be honest with you, I don't love the ESPN radio, but they were talking about the NFL draft, so I was intrigued. I started listening to it, and some of these guys, they were mocking Kyle Pitts as a top 5 pick in the draft this year. And I understand that he's an elite talent. I understand that he might be one of the best prospects, tight end prospects ever, maybe, top 5. Is he worth a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, Al?
I mean, if you have him as a top player on your board, then yeah. I mean, you're not going to take him just because you need a tight end, because he's not really a tight end. He's a wide receiver who is going to qualify at tight end. I mean, how much blocking is he really going to do in the NFL? So if I think that to mock anyone, I mean, is ridiculous, because you could do it for, if you maybe you have him as the 20th best player on your board, if you're an NFL radio host and you're like, oh, I would never take him in the top 5, fine. But if a team who has millions and millions of dollars invested into scouting, into putting their board together, has him there. I mean, why wouldn't you take him? He's not going to be there when you pick again.
That's true. That's very true, Al.
Same thing we do in the NFL, in our drafts, when everyone's like, oh, reach. Oh my God, you took that player ahead of the, and then you're like, no, this player wasn't going to be here when it came back the other way. I don't care that I reached for Taysom Hill and, ahead of Tom Brady and all these other guys, because I want Taysom Hill, or whatever, example you want to give. How about you? Where are you on Pitts?
Well, I mean, you can't deny his talent, right? I'm just, I don't know. So when I was doing my initial rankings, typically when I'm doing my rankings, it's based off of Superflex tight end premium. And I was kind of at that inflection point. Same with you, Alec, right around the 6-7 point. Do you want to go and get a player like Devonta Smith who has some question marks? Or are you more open to getting a guy like Kyle Pitts? Would you want to pull a trigger on like a Zach Wilson, a Trey Lance? Because we do know in Superflex, those positions are extremely valuable. The only thing that kind of gives me a little bit of shock in terms of choosing Kyle Pitts is Kyle Pitts as a top 5-6 pick is I look at a guy like Evan Ingram. I look at a guy like David Njoku, even TJ Hawkinson, who is probably a top 3 or 4 dynasty tight end right now. But if he's on your team, is he really the reason you're making the playoffs or winning your league? I would argue that he's not, right? Or even OJ Howard. Like OJ Howard's another guy that there's just so much, there's so much hate right now for a guy like OJ Howard, and he's showing glimpses of it. But then finally this year, okay, he's got Tom Brady. Tom Brady throws to the tight ends and he gets injured, right? Or before the season even starts. And then you see Cameron Brate have a pretty reasonable season, right? So I don't know. I'm a little bit reluctant whether or not I would choose a Kyle Pitts over a Trey Lance or Zach Wilson, or even that second tier of wide receivers with like a Jalen Waddle or a Rondell Moore. I'm still uncertain right now. And I just worry that if you still have to wait 2 or 3 years for this first round pick, wouldn't you rather have a talent that can immediately make an impact on your team?
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, Kyle Pitts undoubtedly will be a top 10 rookie draft pick
Immediately. Yeah,
it's both in the real NFL draft, probably a top 15 pick, and in your rookie dynasty leagues, he's top 7 or 8 pick. I mean, he'll probably go around that 7-8. And there's nothing more valuable than having an advantage at tight end. So if he does pan out to be one of those guys, and especially in a premium league, I mean, think about how valuable having Darren Waller or Travis Kelce is in your leagues. And if you're double PPR, start 2 tight end. I mean, that you can't replace that. But like you said, you have identified example after example of prospects that were touted to be the next savior at the tight end position, and it just hasn't happened. So yeah, it would, again, and you make great points that some of the wide receivers, the running backs, and certainly the quarterbacks are there. But how many quarterbacks flame out? How many of them become Blaine Gabbert? How many of them go by the wayside? Christian Ponder. We can.
I can't remember who put it out on Twitter. It might have been like Adam Schefter or something like that. But what was it? 0 quarterbacks drafted in the first round between 2010 and 2016 were currently on their team. Like, that's an astounding stat. The fact that it's just so hard to hit in the NFL at one of these starting QBs. Yeah,
even the best guys are bad at evaluating QBs. I mean, no greater recent example than Mitch Trubisky going at 2 ahead of Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, and that's another reason, by the way, that Howie Rossman, I'm really interested in this move with Jalen Hurts, because I've read a couple articles where he had said that he kicks himself because he had Russell Wilson queued up in the second round when the Eagle in that year of that draft, and said, hey, you know what, I'll get him in the next round. It'll be too much of a reach to take Russell Wilson in the second. And then Seattle picked him right before the Eagles picked him. And now he said Jalen Hurts reminded him a lot of Russell Wilson. So he's like, I'm not doing that again. So he selected him in the second round. Everyone called it a reach, right? Everyone called it a reach when it happened, because he was originally a 3rd round quarterback. So good for Howie. He didn't make the same mistake twice. So I think that applies again to our fantasy drafts too. If you identify a player and you like him and it's a round or 2 early, it's okay to take him if you don't think he's going to be there. And I don't remember exactly what we were talking about there. About taking quarterbacks.
Yeah. Versus say like a Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what your team needs and what you think the upside is. I think that Kyle Pitts is definitely more like a wide receiver than he is a tight end. And if you think he's going to be, and again, let's see what team gets him. If it's a team like, what team is if it's a team that's going to use the tight end and we know that they do a lot, then hey, maybe it does make sense. Just think of him like a wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm just laughing in the chat here. Our boy Clipboard Jesus talks about how he had such high hopes for Jake Locker, and it's just like it's a perfect example, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, even if you drafted Blake Bortles, you're like, oh my God, I hit for fantasy. This is great. And then 2 years he's out of the league. This is the point I was going to make about quarterbacks. Everyone, when they draft these quarterbacks, I'm going to have this guy for 10 years. No, I think that you have to, again, understand, like last year in startups, I don't know. It was quite obvious to me that when people were taking Teddy Bridgewater because he was in a good situation, that like that's like a 1 year guarantee thing. I think that when you look at someone like Carolina this year at pick 8, they're likely going to take a quarterback, and I think the under over on Teddy Bridgewater game started this year is like what 7.5, maybe 9.5 if you want to get crazy.
If they draft a quarterback, and if it's somebody like Trey Lance or Zach Wilson, because I think Justin Fields is going to go at 2 to your Jets. I would be shocked if he didn't.
Don't be shocked, because a lot of the talk now is that Zach Wilson's going to.
I know, and that's why I would be shocked, because I don't think Zach Wilson is a top talent. But again, what the hell do I know, right? If these NFL evaluators can't even get to the QB position, right? What do I know? But I'm just not a big Zach Wilson guy in general. So I guess then the question becomes, Al, do you think that any of these running backs, the top end running backs, are round 1 NFL talents? Well, maybe not talents, because even if they are, quote, a round 1 talent, NFL teams are getting smarter, right? We saw round 2 was kind of the sweet spot last year for a lot of these elite running backs. Do you think that we see maybe like a Najee Harris or Travis Etienne or somebody else go in the first round of the draft this year?
I personally do not think so. I don't think that I've seen mocks where Atlanta takes a running back in the middle of the round if they trade back, or if they already own the pick. And I haven't seen ETN mocked in the first round, but I would bet against it. I think that if the number on all the sports books is a half on, I'm going to take if it's 1.5. I'm definitely hitting the under. If it's a half, that's a tougher situation, because obviously a team could do it, especially a contender that feels like they're a running back away. We saw it last year with Kansas City. They took with the very last pick, because you do get that 5th year out of a running back. So that means you get all of their max, you get all of their useful years in their first contract. Now, as we've seen now, is that running backs are getting a little bit smarter. I know they don't have a ton of holdout leverage, but what if they have a good agent? They're working for a new deal in year 3 if they've already proved in the first couple of years. So I do not see that Harris going in the first round, but obviously he's the only guy that probably would. ETN is more of a second round appropriate player. But I was listening to Mario Puig. He has a great podcast where he talks about the rookies, and he has ETN 1 over Najee Harris, and I kind of agree with him. He made a compelling case that Travis Etienne has a lot of the same traits and characteristics of Jamal Charles, and even almost like a better prospect. So if you're a team, why are you gonna? Again, it depends on how you have those guys weighted. The short answer is I would not see a running back going in round 1 this year.
Well, our friends over at Roster Watch, who of course you are now part of Roster Watch, Al,
I contribute.
Contributor. Have Najee Harris similar to like a Matt Forte type prospect.
Yeah, a lot. That's the consensus.
That makes me excited. That type of prospect makes me excited. I agree with you though, man. I don't see any of these running backs being taken in the first round.
Well, here you go. Shane, answer this. Yeah. Where would you go back to your mindset of the rookie running backs last year? Where would you slot Harris and ETN now, knowing what you know now about them versus knowing what you know, but like rank all of, where does Harris fit in and where do you slot ETN in?
So I do have Najee Harris ahead of Travis Etienne.
Okay, so where would Harris go in the ranking?
Man, that's tough, right? I have Najee Harris probably right around. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I have Cam Akers as my RB2 in that class from last year. So I've got JT, Jonathan Taylor. I'm
going to give you a better way to do it. Okay, knowing what you know now, let's go back to our rookie last year. Who is the RB1 for you in Dynasty?
Jonathan Taylor.
Who's number 2?
Cam Akers.
Who's number 3?
DeAndre Swift.
4.
This is where I'm considering either like a J.K. Dobbins or Najee Harris. To me, that's kind of the spot right there.
So both of them ahead of Gibson.
Yeah. I think so. You know, it's Gibson's tough, but I worry about the Washington situation in general.
Okay.
And I don't want to get pigeonholed into that, but
all right, so let's keep going. Let's go.
Yeah.
So you have Harris here. You have ETN here. Then you probably have Gibson and Dobbins. That's your cluster. And then where? James Robinson after that?
I have James Robinson. And people, look, I feel like people have just forgotten about what James Robinson did last year.
Well, they did. And go here, and then let me rebut. I didn't interrupt you. Go ahead. Okay. Talk about James Robinson, because I think he's the most interesting of them all for the reason that you're probably about to say.
Yeah. People are talking about how the Jaguars should take a running back in the draft this year because they have so many picks, but they have so many problems. Why the hell would you take an early round running back, one of these elite players, when you found your guy in James Robinson? I don't buy the narrative that, well, you know, he was an undrafted rookie, therefore they're going to just move on. No, it's, hey, look, we know what we have in James Robinson. They might draft one of these, maybe they draft like a Michael Carter or something like that, right? Which then you wonder if it's going to take a few of those third down touches away from James Robinson. But when you have a player that did it, that he produced, and every report is that, well, that you would think logically the Jags are going to get better this year, right? Trevor Lawrence was he knew how to use his running backs. He knew how to throw the running backs. And the fact that James Robinson proved it, I think that the fact that like James Robinson is now at the bottom of that cluster and he's going mid second round. To me, it's like he should be like mid third round. I'm seeing him fall into the mid third rounds. To me, he's like a late second round guy. If I can get James Robinson, if I'm at like one of the top 3 picks and I can get James Robinson at right around the 2-3 turn, I'm snapping that call because I think he's going to be productive. And yeah, maybe he's not going to have the same market share as last year where like 86% of touches, but what if he still has 70 touches or 70% of that market share? Like that's still considered a bell cow. And what if he's more productive? What if he's better in his year 2?
Yeah, I think that there's a wide chasm between the real value of James Robinson and what his liquid value is, what he could be traded for. And I think that they're both correct. You know, I mean, James Robinson dominated touches. He literally shoved Leonard Fournette off the team. He shoved any other competition away from him, and he literally grabbed hold of the starting job. So we know he's there from a talent perspective, but draft pedigree does matter. So, because what happens, and it didn't happen last year, if James Robinson fumbles twice in 2 games, or if he has 3 mediocre games in a row, I'm just saying generally that he's not going to have as long of a leash as maybe a second round or a first round rookie like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Imagine he had performances like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They'd already just tried the next guy. Now, the second part, there's 3 parts to this. The second part is that the Jags are going to either sign or draft a running back because Raquel Armstead is basically, he was on the COVID list all year, and Devine Ozigbo is just a warm body. So they don't necessarily need an RB1. They need an RB2 and an RB3. So they're going to have to acquire guys. So James Robinson is going to have to dodge about 5 free agent running backs, plus he's going to have to dodge guys drafted on day 1 or day 2. So now if the Jaguars draft a running back on day 3 or 4, in round 4 or 5, no problem. If they sign someone like Brian Hill to be the backup, no problem. We're still, I mean, we're not going to be afraid of that. But here's the danger with James Robinson, at least what I believe the market thinks, is that even if they sign, say, Kenyon Drake, even if it's Todd Gurley, who we all agree is obviously not Todd Gurley anymore, James Conner, Jamal Williams, if the Packers let him go, right? So, but I'm saying that these players can hurt the usage, because if the Jaguars just say sign James Conner, I mean, James Conner is going to get 8 to 11 touches, right? He's going to get 7 to 9 touches per game. That then appropriately slots. So there's a lot of dodging of proverbial bullets that the James Robinson needs to do in order to make it through. Whereas some of the other running backs,
every team like that, Al, every team has.
DeAndre Swift doesn't have to dodge those bullets.
Okay, yeah, DeAndre Swift is, but
why wouldn't this is the tier we're talking about him in?
Yeah.
We're talking about him in this world.
Okay,
in this bookended tier with the rookie running backs, Cam Akers, all those guys.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's a fair, very fair point. I think Cam Akers, I mean, one of the reasons I was so high on him last year was just the fact that we've seen what the Rams like to do with the running backs. And it took most of the season to get there. But when we got there, oh my God, it was exciting, right? And you would assume that there's going to be that usage again next year just because he was so damn good. My question to you, Al, Dynasty aside, let's just talk about redraft leagues. You're on the clock. You've got J.K. Dobbins or James Robinson. And we've already talked about a guy that we like late in drafts is Gus Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you taking, J.K. or James Robinson?
I think that it's so you're talking about like in a best ball draft, right?
Just in a best ball draft right now.
So I'm going to give you the cowardly answer, and then I'm going to give you a little bit more like a real man answer. Okay. So the cowardly answer is, and it's the truthful answer, is that I'm going to do about 45 best balls this season.
I knew you were going this way. I knew you were going that direction.
All right, and I'm going to diversify my profile.
Yeah,
I'm going to have probably, if I'm faced with that decision and to say hypothetically all 40, 45 best balls, I'm literally going to have 50% share each because there's no way to tell. But if it was to say it was like $1,000 best ball and I only get one shot, I probably would feel more comfortable at this point in February with J.K. Dobbins, although I concede that the upside of James Robinson is probably better. But knowing that I have to dodge all those free agents and day one and day two rookie running backs, I know what J.K. Dobbins' role is going to be.
I think that's fair. Look, I love J.K. And correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of like pre-draft process, J.K. was in your conversation for the top prospect.
Yeah,
right?
I had Swift as 1, Dobbins as 2.
Right. And look, I mean, we're splitting hairs here, right? Like these guys are all so good. They're so talented. I think that if you're sitting at that point in the draft, it's okay. Whoever falls to me, if it's J.K. Dobbins, I'll be happy to pull the trigger on J.K. Dobbins. If it's James Robinson, I'm happy to pull the trigger on James Robinson. It's going to be a fun year. But one thing that I'm learning pretty quickly, Al, is that if you don't get at least one of these solid running backs in the first 3 odd rounds, it's hairy, man. Around rounds 5, 6, 7, and there aren't even really a lot of just lottery ticket players that you can go for that could potentially there's no James Robinsons yet, but I guess we didn't know about James Robinson.
Right. But if you're in the 4th round and you're faced, you've only have one running back so far, you're faced with you're going to have to push up running backs like Kareem Hunt, Chris Carson, who is not a lock to be back with the team. So, I know, it was a little bit of a sucker's bet last year, but I think going robust running back so far is how I've gravitated, basically taking a running back in the first 3 rounds of all of my best ball drafts. Because I want my rock solid RB1, whether it's Zeke, even on the lower end of that, or if it's, Dalvin Cook, Kamara, whatever it is. And then in round 2, I want the James Robinson or Swift or one of those guys. And then round 3, I want Antonio Gibson. I even want David Montgomery. I mean, we can debate if people believe in him or not, but I want to come out with 3 guys that have roles and have jobs, and then I'll hit my wide receivers. Yeah.
So we're going to end it shortly here, Al. There's just one little point because I think you kind of nailed it here. I'm looking at underdog ADPs right now. And when I look at the 3rd round, these are all the current running backs that are going in round 3 of early best balls. We got James in this order: James Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then Najee Harris. And then after that, I mean, there's a few guys in early round 4, like the David Montgomerys of the world. But if you miss on, say you went wide receiver, and then if you miss on one of those bunches of running back there, it's kind of like the lifeline. I'm worried for my team construction. I'm worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to convince me. I'm robust running back the whole way, for better or for worse.
I love it. Early on, I think I'm now in 6 best balls. 4 out of the 6 of them I'm choosing around the end of the round, either the 12 or right on the 11-12 turn. And I definitely prefer my teams where I'm in the middle or early drafting. That's just to start it out, because you can come back in early round 3 and get one of those running backs to solidify your team. But it's going to be fun. I mean, there's so much time left, and this is what we live for, Al.
Oh, yes.
So let's end it there. Let's tell the good people where they can find you.
I'll make it quick. At Alan Seslowski on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Come see me. ton of content. Every week I'm doing an article for our friends over at Dynasty Depot where I talk about, or I write about risers and fallers, and then also doing a video talking about Dynasty risers and fallers over at Roster Watch YouTube page. So go check that out over there. And of course, every week with the Geek on the DFS Army podcast feed, subscribe to that, the Bold Call podcast, where we just talk about best ball all day, all night. And then Shane, hopefully a couple times a month at least, that you and I will, if not weekly, get back to doing the Dynasty talk, because I've always enjoyed doing this with you.
We love it. I mean, we've been going about every 2 weeks or so early in the season, but as we're going to get back to a rhythm of weekly. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, you can follow us on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. We really appreciate it. If you like what you've been listening to, please like. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're on Twitter, please retweet. We appreciate it. We love you. Al, for Flex Matt, we are the Flex Network.
This is the Flex Network. This is the Flex Network. Flex on them. Flex on everybody. This right here is the Flex Network. Yeah.